Thanks, Concorla. Minister, you may think that because of the draconian manner in which you implemented the property tax that you have the acquiescence of the population. I don't think that's the case, and I'm wondering the cost of the recent debacles in the handling of the situation, which actually probably added insult to injury to homeowners with the letters that were sent out, the cost of the operation, the cost of the mistake around the first-time buyers and so on.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I am advised by the Revenue Commissioners that the introduction of the local property tax amounts to the largest ever extension of the self-assessment system and represents a significant administrative challenge. The expenditure report for 2013, which was published by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform in December last, makes a provision of £25.9 million in 2013 for the implementation of the LPT. I am advised by the Revenue Commissioners that the total costs incurred in establishing local property tax to the end of October 2013 is £24.29 million, of which £21.98 million was incurred in 2013. Also, by the end of October, over 1.6 million LPT returns had been filed for 2013, and approximately 215 million had been transferred by revenue to the Exchequer. I understand from revenue that over 500,000 returns have now been filed in respect of 2014. The Deputy asked about the cost of reissuing the latest letter seeking payment. But I am advised by the Revenue Commissioners that no letters were reissued. She may be referring to the fact that letters were issued in October to some 988,000 property owners who paid their 2013 LPT by lump sum. That is by a debit or credit card, cash cheque or postal order or single debit authority, or by way of regular cash payments through a service provider. These letters are not a reissue but a formal annual feature of the pay and file season for LPT, and as I've explained to the House previously in written replies, are asking property owners to decide how they want to pay their LPT in respect of 2014 and advise revenue accordingly. Of the 988,000 letters, I am informed that approximately 950,000 were issued by post and 37,000 were issued electronically. The specific costs associated with the issue of these letters was £694,136, and this figure is broken down as follows: postage 441,762, advertising 191,290, paper 30,669, envelopes 19,495, printing 10,920, bringing the total to 694,136.
Thank you, Minister. The balance of your reply will appear in the official record. Deputy Daly.
Thanks, Concorla. It was a bit hard to follow the price of the envelopes and the stamps and all of that without the written information in front of us, but we will obviously study the reply. I think the point here is, and your first comment dealt with it, is that this is an enormous change in relation to our tax system, and I wonder, would you acknowledge, Minister, that the manner in which the government forced through this draconian legislation last year has actually resulted in a situation where a lot of hardship and errors, if you like, have been brought in its implementation. The recent letters have been discussed at length, but they did cause enormous disquiet for people. They are going to have to be clarified, and I just don't think that that is good enough. Tens of millions have been paid out in the administration of this charge, and is it not now time to look, in the context of the discussion that we've just had about the number of mortgage arrears and the continuation of that situation, that this tax is in actual fact an unsustainable tax, and you should be looking at alternatives to it rather than continuing on the mistakes that you've already stood over?
Minister.
Yeah, the implementation of a property tax was always going to be very difficult, and everybody in the House knows that, especially when it was being implemented against the resistance of many deputies and groups in this House, and also by many organised groups outside of the House. So nobody ever made light of the task of implementing it, and it is quite difficult to bring it in. But taking everything into account, I think the Revenue did a very good job. They had a very high level of compliance last year, over 90%, and there was a difficulty, as we all know, earlier in the year. But it's on track now again, and it looks as if It will operate reasonably well again from a point of compliance and revenue generation in 2014.
Deputy Daly.
The resistance is still there, Minister. The fact that your legislation was so draconian that it sort of compelled compliance doesn't mean that people agree with the tax, even though you may have got majority payment at this stage. I wonder, could you tell us about the cost of the error in relation to the first-time buyers and that mistake, and how much that has cost, and are there any other ones that we can anticipate?
Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, we always intended as a kind of an incentive that to the property market that people who bought houses, I think it was in 2013, would be exempt from property tax. But there was an error in the drafting of the bill, which was brought to my attention last spring. And rather than announce something that might adversely affect the property market, particularly in Dublin, which was just about to take off at the time, we said we leave it go and correct it at the end of the year. I think the cost of it was somewhere just in excess of 3 million. If it had been, if this error hadn't occurred in the draft, we'd have collected, the revenue would have collected slightly in excess of 3 million extra in the course of 2013.